okay? So now that we've kind of worked with the hand fight and worked with that, so the lateral movement in the hand fight is never going to stop. That is one of the, probably the singular constant in all sort of combat sports or combative interactions. So now we're going to add the post/frames, post and frame. So I deal with two primary ones. So the first one is just a regular collar tie, which you'd see in wrestling, right? So collar tie, we call it that because it is, you know, so I'm on the collar side here. Maybe you need to switch sides, we will here in a second. So a couple main things we want from here. So one, see my forearm is basically on this collarbone here. My elbow is kind of in the chest. And now as far as hand placement, right? So kind of two main places. So one, if I go on the neck, I don't get very much pressure on his head as far as postural standpoint, but it's more difficult for him to strip that grip off. Because he goes for like his usual kind of like strip, like he wants to go to his 2-on-1 off of my collar tie, right? It's low, it's kind of, I mean, it's not easy, but it's easier for me to maintain it, but it doesn't do as much posturally, right? If I go higher up on the head, I get much more work on his neck, but now when he does the same thing to strip the grip, it comes off relatively easily. And that's kind of like a wrestling problem 101. So now, the things that a regular collar tie gives me, all right, and everything has pluses and minuses, so that's another thing I want you guys to keep in mind here, is that like nothing comes with a positive that doesn't have some sort of, you know, correlating negative with it. So things that I like about it is that one, I have a passive frame or post with that elbow, you know, and up to the bicep here. So even if my hand doesn't do anything, right, as he tries to close the distance and I just maintain this, I have passive distance, right? So we've got that. And then when I've got my hand on his head, I have the ability to manipulate his body to my left, to my right, front, back, right? So I'm here and here, so I feel some pressure, I can push him this way. Feel some pressure here, I can pull him this way, right? So, again, they come with, you know, its own drawbacks. So the drawback of something like a collar tie is that, one, what control do I have on his hands? Pretty much nothing, right? So if I'm here, I like this in quick applications, all right? So I've got this collar tie here. Now what am I doing with this hand? Sherry, what is it?
Probably trying to control his other hand.
Control his opposite arm, right? So especially as a right-hander, more than likely, right? Like 89% of the world are right-handers. So more than likely the things he's gonna try to do striking-wise or grabbing-wise with the right hand. So what I wanna do with it is I'm gonna parry and or block at the bicep here. If I can move that down to the wrist, or if I can just move to the wrist, or I like to grab the hand as well. Like I like to just grab like the meat of the hand. For me, that works really well. Because one, I get pretty decent control, but the good thing about grabbing a guy's hand is that now I kind of take away his ability to grab with it, right? So I'm here and here, and I post on the biceps. So go ahead and give me this little like business, like trying to strike. So I'm staying inside here, right? And then as I get to there, boom, I come down to the wrist, right? So now if I get here and here, if I'm using the collar tie, do not hang out there. It is not a hangout place. Because like I said, you do not have good control over the hand. So for me, it's kind of a quick thing. Like I don't mind it if I'm kind of in one of those like, you know, all of a sudden the guy's just on top of me and I'm like, oh, bam, right, okay. Like it's good for applications like that or in working to build up my space, but it's not the kind of place where I want to be and fight for an extended period of time. So I'm here and here, one, he's gonna be able to get this hand back, or he can grab with this hand. He can even just do something as simple as grab my belt, right, and just keep me close to him. Right now, okay. You know, simple problems like that. So again, comes with positives, comes with negatives. Positives are the ability to redirect him backwards, forwards, push him left, pull him right, block on that bicep, grab that wrist. And guys who've done other classes with me, so like once we get the wrist control, that'll set up some other things we can do in the future with that. So, does anybody have any major questions over that conceptually? And so what I want you to do is I want you to work just a little bit on. So I want the guy, put some pressure on you, right? So I want you first to work kind of positionally. Feel what you can do, pushing, pulling, redirecting, right? Once we get a few reps of that, then I want you to start attacking with your hands, right? So light strikes, so I mean, so something like, you know, like just kind of open, like give him something to think about, right? Or this could be like, you know, simulated knifing, you know, or stabbing, otherwise, you know, poking types of weapons with that. So see what you can kind of get as far as postural and positional control and then maintaining here, right? If he starts to shift his hand to go to the other hand, I can move side to side. That's perfectly acceptable as well. I can move hand to hand, okay? Does that make sense, guys? Does anybody have any major questions on that? Okay, let's get in two groups again. Switch up partners, so different groups, but same thing. Again, start out initially just with our positional control, and then we'll add kind of the simulated striking environment with that. So we kind of, and again, keep this low level. This is like 20%, like pace, guys. No, that's fine.
So,
Good. So now once you get the chance to get out of there, yes, good, good, yeah. That's exactly the kind of thing I would use it for. Again, definitely don't want to hang out here just because you don't have that good of control as a weapons base, or even like a clothing-based environment. Like when I'm doing like jiu-jitsu, the collar tie sucks a fair amount because the guy will just reach down and grab his belt, or he just grabs the lapel and just keeps you close, right? So yeah, exactly. So it's like, it kind of changed with that, but exactly. So he comes in tight, I'm like, oh shit, boom, oh, cool. Like something, it can just be that right there. Hold my underwear up.
Yeah, so keeping that about here, that's what we just want. So start like her. Good. See a little lower. Yeah.
And so once you do that, Tim, I want you to try to work on like moving your feet a little more. Like you've got good active hands, but you're kind of stapled in your feet. Like so you saw that one. Like you kind of put like a ton of pressure when you threw him, but it was like full body row, and then you stayed here. Whereas like you get more of that, I was kind of like, right, just kind of stay a little bit light, see if you can move your feet a little bit more. No. Yeah, and once you see him, so you see, like, so when, as soon as you feel his weight go one way or the other, give him some help that way and go the opposite. Yeah, and that's kind of like collar tie numero uno. Yep. So you feel him give you a little pressure up, bam. Yep, and be gone. Perfect. And that's all that you really want or kind of need out of this. Just something as simple as like, you know, whatever happens, or especially like let's say type of thing, I don't know, like I'm kind of at the wall here, Ernie just kind of comes at me and all of a sudden, you know, I'm like, oh shit, boom, guy right here, go ahead, put some pressure on me. Yeah, that's fine. So he's over here, okay. Right? You're not hanging out there. This isn't like, oh, I'm gonna snap and set up my height. No. He's in tight, get that elbow and that good post inside. And as soon as you feel him move this way, move that way, help him go that way and go the other way. Yep.
Okay, so now this next one.
Good, much better. Let me close with you a little bit more, Tim. Like, your pace right now is way too high. So, like, kind of like slow it down. So, like, I'll be the bad guy. You like let me in, right? That's the whole point. So let me in, and now. That's it. Exactly. That's it. Right?
You ready?
Yeah. So just for whatever reason, calm down, dude. Like you got close enough to drill. It's like running away. See what I mean when I'm talking about like everyone would just run away. Just doing what you told me to do earlier. So hold. So see, I'm working to your left. Now pull me this way. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm just giving you a look on that. Good. And that's all it is. Yep. And then we make sure we got the other hand up there, checking the bicep, checking the wrist. You know, if you can get here and here, that's cool. Here and here is also cool. Sometimes I get here and here on the wrist, right? So I'm still on top, inside. Boom. That sets up the drag stuff as we move to that later. Things like that.
So share your job with your right hand right there. Now, so close in the bicep.
Perfect. Yep. As soon as you feel her go some way, you just help her go that way, and then you're going the opposite. Like I said, this is kind of just a, you know, transitory, transitional sort of position, right? So I'll go ahead and get it. So, you know, boom. Right, so get that. And as soon as you see me start to work, yes, that's it. Right. So now we do the opposite. Perfect. That's all it is, right? And it could just, you don't have to really hang out there. So if you feel me, like, so when I come in, like, that's it. It can be something as simple as that, right? You get this up, right? Go ahead and get that up, because you see how that maintains like a plausible frame, right? And then as soon as the guy steps, moves, help him go that way, go off the other side. Okay? Everybody get some reps. Yes, sir. You may need a drink. Bicep, wrist, hand, whatever it is you have access to. So I like to keep this like kind of like, yes, but keep your elbow, yes, that right. So now it's very difficult for him to come outside with that hand, and inevitably he'll try to come inside with it, and when he does, you let him come inside, right? So if I'm here and here, and I keep this really tight position, right? So he tries to go outside with the hand, right? It's difficult, so inevitably he's gonna try to come inside. When he tries to come inside with the hand, it's relatively easy to get rid of him that way. But it's keeping this not only like inside, but I'll like staple like my elbow onto my rib cage there. So like I'm going with Donahoe, and this is like, especially like when him and I are doing like grip fighting stuff, is that like, not like, this is okay, but there's space here, so you get with a guy who's going to fight you back actively. So go ahead, give me a little work, right? So you're going to end up with that. So I like to I'm staying in really tight. So even if I lose the bicep, he doesn't have a good like avenue to go with his hand, and now I can start to come back, fight again, right? And you're going to end, I mean, in the jiu-jitsu sense, you're going to do that for like 47 seconds straight trying to find position.
Yeah.
But if I keep that here, even when I lose the bicep, he doesn't have a lot to go on. Whereas if I'm like way out here, get that, yeah, like he has immediate options off of that. And even if he doesn't know what he's doing, but he just wants to close in and that elbow's out, right? Now he's grabbing, right? So when I keep that in, tucked in nice and tight, it just really helps seal that off. Okay? Anybody have any major questions on that? What do we notice with that?
You use your opponent's leverage against them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Head control's key.
Like I said, I like it not as a fight here for very long position. For me, it's kind of it works nice as sort of just like, oh shit, like hand comes up, and then if he's moving one way or the other, I just help him go that way, get out. But if I'm in some sort of like protracted engagement, I'm not gonna be there just because I don't have good control of the hands, but I do like it in the control the posture sort of sense. So we'll add kind of the other frame to that. So I alluded to it before, which is just the cross post, right? So if I'm with Jared here, okay, so we'll turn this way. But so the cross post over here on the collar tie, the cross post is basically the opposite, right? So basically just posting over here. So for me, I like to basically just be in the jawline right here, just because one, I get a little bit of control against the head, right? And so as we talked about, like controlling the head is everything in grappling, right? So if I bring this down to more like the chest or something, he can still direct his head towards me. It's relatively easy to get out of, whereas this is not particularly easy to get out of, right? So the things I'm gonna use something like a cross post for are one, to help me make space to circle outside, kind of how we talked about with when we're just maintaining our distance, fighting the hands and taking that like, kind of that check hook step or that like real tight step. So I get in here and here. So it's relatively easy to maintain my outside position. Things that I can use to get to it. So one, let's say I am in a collar tie, right? I can switch it out to a cross post. As we kind of get into other stuff, so as we get into like, let's say I'm in the underhook, right, and I'm here and here, I can post on this and use that to help extract that arm sometimes and use that to circle out to get away. Other thing, you could use the same thing if I'm in the overhook. So if I'm like here and here, right, keep the guy away, cross post, maybe now he starts to feel the need to get his hand back, right? So he starts to get his hand back, that's a way to get away from simple things like that. But the basis of it is just, one, I stay across kind of in the jawline here. The other thing is that whenever we're doing any sort of posting or framing, I need to have my arm at 90 or beyond. If it gets inside, like, shit, you could tap me out with this because my elbows are so terrible. But like anytime it gets inside of that, I lose essentially all of my power and my leverage against the guy, right? And then the other thing is that like, so I don't really want to be using like muscle to try to hold a guy because that's going to fatigue, right? So if I'm kind of really bent, I mean, I could maintain this for a decent amount of time and I'm going to start to fatigue. Whereas like this doesn't use much because it's mostly just the bone pushing back against the bone. And I kind of, basically it's just all getting transferred to my feet. So that's relatively easy to stay there, right? The other thing is that if I get a little bit bent here, this guy just chops on this elbow, right? Now he kind of closes right in. Whereas if I'm here and here in a circle, it's not as easy for him to just chop and beat that. I actually brought this up in jiu-jitsu the other night. It's one way I kind of have been beating the guys, who are grabbing like lapel, is that I'm either just chopping here or I pull in there and then using that to close inside of it to kill that really strong like lapel post off of that. So does anybody have any major questions on cross post? Okay, so same thing. So I want you guys to start in tight. If you want to start from the collar tie and then work it across and make it into the cross post, please do that. Again, keep the speed kind of low because one, I don't want you guys getting too fatigued before we get into the kind of the semi-live stuff. But also I want you guys just to be able to see it coming at you from a technical standpoint. Because again, if you just never let the guy like touch you, like, yeah, it's relatively easy in a training environment, but you have to set yourself up to be put in that position. So the other thing is, once we get here, I didn't quite touch on this, is, so if I'm cross-posting with this hand still has to be active, right? So usually for me, the easiest thing to do, is I'm here and here, is I'm getting rid of this arm, right? Getting rid of that arm, so I can step outside of it and go somewhere else. So something as simple, so maybe I'm like here and here, I'm like, oh shit, I want to get out, so I get rid of this hand, get rid of this arm, right? Things like that, kind of simple. Okay, all right, so same thing, let's break up into our two groups and let's rock that here for a minute. Push it in, Tim, so when you get back, bring it, go close. This way. No,
this way?
Yeah, and now be gone. Yeah. Yeah. So, because that's going to be like your easiest route to step outside of that lead foot. and to go outside of him and to stay away. Yeah.
As he's coming to you,
Yeah.
you can feel the direction, then you can figure out it's the same shift that Lane was talking about.
Yep, and that was good. Just also make sure you keep this hand active. So like when you switch to here and here, just make sure this hand, because he's still gonna have, because if he grabs you here, you're still kind of like, this sucks. Like you can kind of keep him away, you know, but like it's still, because now like, go ahead and grab like my shirt or whatever. Like, yeah, so he's kind of like being a douche, right? So I can still like, okay, cool, get rid of that hand. And that's when we still get out of it. And then when we start working in with the wall, then it'll kind of start to make even more sense,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm working with like Donahoe, like over here, and yeah, so if he closes in, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. So if I'm like, you know, here and here, and I switch to this cross post, this is a really good way to use this because I'm kind of braced here, and he's still putting good pressure in, right? But now I start to circle out. So that's a way that it becomes particularly good. And you see this a lot, you know, when you watch MMA and stuff like that, is that like, one, because you have to protect yourself when you circle out, but it's so difficult, like if we're just locked up, right, the chances of me getting out are relatively low unless I either A, can take this big step and redirect, or what happens, guy gets in here and he blocks and makes a little, so now he's got some room to move his feet out of there. So same kind of concept. Slow down a little bit, guys. You got it. I know. You see me coming, like, hey, turn it up, guys. Good. Good. Yeah, and that's another place where I'll kind of find this too, is like, so as I'm like stepping, like out of his lines, like we said, like, so Tim's kind of closing down on me, right? So we talk about like, you know, stepping out and doing that step. So like, so as I step out, it's kind of, it's posting off of that too, right? Because one, I want to create the, you know, I want to create the angle to get out and away from him. But if I try to do too much here, and I get kind of turned wonky, I sort of take that hand out of it. So I step here, now it's kind of like, okay, it's easy, relatively easy to frame him and get out. And then, yeah, and as long as you keep your feet moving. Let him close on you a little bit more. Yeah, yes.
So it's like you're replacing, it's like,
Allow his face to close on your hand as much as possible.
now, so if you do that, I like to be,
Oh, yeah. Like right.
because now, see how you have that, now you can just pin this with your, you can pin that, or you just push on the medicine. There you go, now, we've got a whole clear area, because that's what Lane will do really well, like when Lane was showing you. Okay.
Yeah. No, exactly like you said, it's like, because this hand becomes, because one thing that happens is like, now granted, I mean, like Donahoe's taller and longer limbed than I am, so he could probably still make contact with that hand if he wanted, but it's much more difficult because I can circle here, so we kind of get in like this extended, so go ahead and grab me with your left, Donahoe. So if I'm moving here, go ahead and move with me, right? It's like, it's relatively difficult for him to establish an opposite hand because it's so far across, and if I keep moving my feet, but the guy can definitely foul you with this hand. So as I'm moving, so I'm constantly trying to get rid of that, but it's also, when we start to work into like the arm drag stuff, it opens up more avenues. You have the drag, you know, you have clearing your wrist. In wrestling, this would just be like a, you know, like an elbow post or something like that, right? Just it'd be something as simple as like, so I'm here and here, and then so it's the elbow post, boom. Like that's how, like, simple like shot 101 is basically just clearing that elbow inside while you're on the same side of his head, boom, come in.
I would use a cross to get my.
And that's what we'll come into. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Can I go this way?
Yep.
Yep, and then move out to your right, Ernie. Good, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and then, yeah, so the next step, then once we kind of get through the basics of this, we'll add the component of being able to grab through the weapon. And that's definitely a thing you can do, and especially like if you add in the wall and stuff like that, right? So, bam, right? So if I add in here, it's like now, this becomes a potential option for like contact shooting and stuff like that, right? So I can, you know, pec index, shoot from there. Whereas if I was in this position or something, maybe not, right? Because you could reach out, grab, foul, stuff like that. Whereas now I create the angle, right, and something easier, or maybe even, you know, use it for things like that. But that's absolutely a way
So
that
then
we can use that.
you probably normally try to post with the same.
If you could keep your dominant hand free,
Yeah.
I would, but you have to be able to do both, right? Like it's
Right,
like
okay.
he gets to fight as well.
Yeah.
So you know you
This
have
is
to
my dominant
exactly. You have to
hand.
take what's available to you and then figure out the rest when you
Yeah.
go. Absolutely. But yes, certainly if you could leave your gun hand free, that's pretty much always like the good option. But yeah.
I'll have to
How you guys doing down
Which is
here?
okay because
We're going for the collar tie down.